Welcome everyone, it's Rayleigh here from Sunflower Stitcheries and Quilting. This is week 1 of our Remember Them sew along. So I have a version of the quilt here so you can see exactly what we're making. So this week we're gathering everything that we need. So start off, you need your pattern. I will say you probably don't need all of the pages just yet. And if you don't want to print out the actual instructions, but you want to use that from your device, then you can save paper that way and just print out the pages that are for the applique. You probably don't even need that this week, but so if you do want to just print out the main pages that we need, initially it's pages 1 to 11. And I've printed it in grayscale because I didn't want to waste the ink. I know what the quilt looks like, and I can always refer to the color picture in on my computer. So you need your pattern. So basically going down the list, you'll need a meter of black fabric. Now I have, I could have sworn there was fabric in the studio somewhere, black fabric, but I had to go and buy some. So I've bought a lovely, I think this is a Bella Solid in just the pure black, because this one I am using is, what I'm using for this quilt is a layer cake. I will put a picture of this layer cake. It's not listed on the back. Urban Farmhouse Gatherings #2 is what this layer cake is. Now, the first quilt we made had a lot of black and white, and so there was a differing density between how much black and how much white, and that was the color change that we needed, or that we had. This particular layer cake has black and some printed black, or quite dark, and then it has grey, and the greys get lighter and lighter, so you can see at the bottom of your screen to where they're almost white. It's sort of it's a bit of an off-white, it's not a pure white. It's going to be different again. So that's my layer cake. Now layer cake is a 10-inch square. Usually there are 40 something of them. 10-inch squares, and there should be 40 something in each. There are 42 in a layer cake, so often that's like an entire range and it works together nicely. So that was what the quilt was designed around. All right, then we need some red and green. So I have my selections over here, got my threads as well. I had a bit of a decision to make between these ones. So this green here is quite a, well, it's a lovely bright green, and I do like it, but I think I'm going to choose the other green. Now this red is a mottled red, and so you can just see that in the finger. I used this red on the other quilt, or something very similar. So these were my initial thoughts, but I'm actually going to go with these two, and I'll tell you why. So this is a plain bright red. I guess you could call it a fire engine red, and I wanted something really bright on the blacks and the greys and the off-white that is in this layer cake. And this is the green that I'm going to go with. Again, because it's grey, I wanted this a muted tone of the green to sit on the greys. But if you go and have a look, so think about what your background is going to be and what will sit nicely on that. With this quilt, this is quite a bit darker. It's more of a cherry because it fitted with that sepia toned biscuit coloured background. In thread, so you do need some, well, if you're going to do embroidery and hand applique, then you will need matching embroidery threads. So your local quilt shop will have that. If you want to use a variegated, you could. I wouldn't go for a really big variegation, but something that is, within the red family to use on your red fabric, not introducing other colors. And you'll also need sewing thread. So I have red sewing thread in case I may do machine applique on this one, and I have green to match. For the actual piecing, I have both grey and black. So because this uses the fabric I've got is quite light in the middle, I don't necessarily want to piece that section in a black thread, but it won't matter so much if I piece all of it, the outer sections, in this grey. So that's probably what I'm going to use when it comes to piecing the quilt top. When you do your half square triangles, you could probably use black, but just be aware that, you know, if you pull a little bit or you have tension's not so great, those threads are going to show. So try and pick a tone of thread that matches. Fusible web. So I have Lisafix. This is actually the end of my roll. So if you want, if you buy Lisafix just by the meter or so, get an old cardboard tube or something rather and roll it up. It will actually store so much better. If you want to, we used to be able to get an old posting tube and you could put it in that so that it's actually really well protected, and also means that if you're in a really humid environment, that the humidity doesn't affect it and it doesn't separate. So I would recommend certainly that you store it rolled up. So need some fusible web. I'm using Lisafix because that's what I'm used to. There are lots of other options out there. As far as the wadding and the backing, I'm going to use what I've got in my studio because I'm wanting to use up a few bits and pieces, and I've got wadding here because I do the long arming. So visit your local quilt shop or contact a long armer near you. They may sell you some wadding as well, and so you've got that option, and backing fabric as well. So basically that's what we need for our gathering all of our supplies. Now let's get into some sorting of fabric. Alright, so as I mentioned before, this layer cake that I'm using is called Urban Farmhouse Gatherings 2, and so I am going to separate them based on how many we need. So we need light 13. So do I go for all of the light ones? Let's actually see if we can separate this background. All right, I'm going to separate them into piles, and then we'll come a little bit closer and we'll see what we can sort out a little bit more. So I've had a play with the fabrics in this layer cake, and you can see that there's a dividing colorway. So this has the creamy off-white background, and then we go to the grey with the white print, and then that becomes a darker grey with the white print, and then there are also this grey with the black print. So these ones are going to become part of my dark, and this section here is my mediums. So I will grade these out as well. So the lighter greys will be towards the center, and these darker ones will be, you know, getting towards the outside of the quilt. So this is my medium pile, and my light pile is has a few of these, the main ones with the more noticeable white print, and then also these ones with the cream background with the grey print. So this is my light pile, my medium pile, and these are my darks. So just let me move these out of the way. So my darks, I've selected these 4 here to do my half square triangles, and then I've got the other dark ones, like black, the print on a black background, and then these with the darker grey and the black print also become part of my dark pile. So have a look at the layout in your pattern, and you'll see where you need to put them. It's sort of laid out in a fairly nice grid pattern, And so dividing up this layer cake, whilst this is not the same as this, it is part of my light pile. And the same with this one. This is not exactly the same as this one, but it will give me that graded effect from the center of the quilt out, which is what we're looking for. So we're ready to go. We've got our fabric sorted, and yep, if you want to sew ahead, you can. Otherwise, next week we're going to be looking at sewing half square triangles, the easy way to do that, and then we're going to be putting our background, the whole background, together. So hopefully you've got nothing planned for next weekend and you can get some sewing done. Enjoy your week. Hi, it's Rayleigh here from Sunflower Stitcheries and Quilting. Welcome to week 2 of our Remember Them Sew Along. This is the bit where we get the back all together into one piece. So we're going to start with cutting the strips for the black corners. Yours may be a different color, and then we'll get on to half square triangles, and then we're going to sew, basically we're going to sew it together in rows, and then we're going to sew the rows together. So it's really, once we get the half square triangles done, it's very much straight piecing, sew your rows across, and then sew your blocks in rows, and then sew the rows together. So I will probably fast forward through that so I can show you the finished quilt backing, and that's our project for this week. So we do need to cut a couple of different strips across the width of the fabric. Now, width of fabric just means from selvage to selvage. I'm going to be basically cutting the background blocks and the squares for the half square triangles. So here we go. So on my cutting mat here, I have got my fabric folded into 4 basically. So this is the 2 selvage edges, and they are sitting straight, and this is the folded edge. So I'm actually going to be cutting through 4 layers. Normally I might turn my cutting board 90 degrees to this, but my table is not quite wide enough to show you that, so I'm going to do it this way instead. Now, do make sure you have a nice fresh blade on your rotary cutter, and I'm just going to straighten up this edge. I have recently changed my blade, so I know it's nice and sharp. Now, try not to throw these bits on the floor, it just requires you to clean up later. Alright, so I have this on the 10-inch line so that I can not go right to the very edge. So I am going to cut the first strip, which is going to be used for the squares, and then I am going to reposition this making sure it's nice and straight. Yep, it's still straight on this edge. Alright, that's my second strip. I'm going to put the rest of that black aside for the moment. Alright, this is the first strip, and this is used for the corner squares. So once again, I am going to line this up on my 10-inch line just so that I've got an easy number to start with, also so that it's in view for you. If you're new to using a rotary cutter, just go slowly and carefully. I'm cutting off the selvage here because I don't need that. And you might notice I keep my blade quite vertical to the ruler. I'll try not to move that this time. So, and you see there's only this tiny bit left. So I'll put that aside to use for scraps. I might cut it up for hexagons or something or other. So these are my 4 that I used for the corner squares. Now get the strip. Now just remember that they are slightly different widths, so don't get them confused or you'll end up with rectangles. Very slight rectangles, but they will be rectangles. Again, I'm cutting off the selvage. And that's 2 of those. Move that fabric out of the way. And you will also get these 4 from the strip, but there's even less left over. That bit can go in the discard pile. Now to make it nice and easy for the half square triangles, I've got my 4 of the darkest ones that are going to be half square triangles with my black. Probably easiest to do it on the black actually, so it'll show up really nicely. I'm going to use this Soline ceramic pencil. So on all 4 of these, I'm simply going to draw myself a line. I will link to a video that I've made that is all about half square triangles. Alright, so you can see that's nice and clear on the black. So if you are using, so you have a different color and your corner squares and half square triangles are not a dark color, then I would certainly suggest a different pen, maybe one of the water erasable pens, so that you can see. You want to be able to see that line clearly. Okay. Now you might notice I'm actually starting from the center out. I'm not actually starting in the corner. I find that I get less of the fabric moving. So if I was to start, so I am lining this directly on the corners. If I start here, sometimes you can get the fabric moving, especially on a bigger piece like this, and I don't want that because I want that line to be right into that corner. So you only need to do it on one, you don't need to do it on both, and then you simply don't cover up the line that you've just created. Put them right sides together. And do you know what I have done? I have actually cut this as a rectangle. So I'm just going to trim off this 1/2 inch. I cut them 1/2 inch too big, and I will need to remark my line. So I will quickly go ahead and do that. So just in case there was any doubt, you can see I've put the correct line and I've actually put a cross on the line that is incorrect. And then we can try this again. Much better. All right, grab your pins. And I like to pin down each side. 4 pins is probably enough. You may want to do more. The reason I do this is because I want to sew down each side, and I don't want the fabrics to shift. So I will go ahead and do that with all of them, and then I'll go and sew them, and we'll come back with them sewn. Okay, so here we have our half square triangles sewn. Cut down the middle, and we have half square triangles. So these will need to be pressed. It's up to you whether you press your seams open or to one side. I'm a bit of a fan of pressing to one side, but that's just me. And then, so once you have pressed them, how about I go and press these two, and we'll get on with the next step. Here we go. We are pressed and ready. So let's deal with one at a time. And we need to trim them and make sure that they are the right size for our pattern. So I'm going to trim this one just a fraction. It's not a lot. The advantage of trimming is that you actually get rid of the little dog ears as well. Good. All right, that one's done. And then we need to do the same with this one. I have pressed my seam towards the black. Just making sure these are actually square. Spin that round and we'll do that one. This one needed just a little bit more tweaking, shall we say. There you go. So now I have two of my half square triangles made. I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of them, press them and trim them so that they are also ready to go. And from there, it's very easily, you know, just sewing squares and blocks together. So just to give them a really good press. As I said, it's up to you if you want to press that seam open, depending. If you want to press it open, I will get you to consider what your quilting plan might be, just in case. If you decide that you want to stitch along this seam somehow around the entire square of the quilt, then you're going to have an issue if you don't have, there won't be a ditch basically. So if you want to stitch in the ditch, then you need to press to one side. If you are happy to stitch out further out from the seam, or something completely different, then go ahead and press your seams open if you wish. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this bit really quickly, the power of editing, and come back and we'll have we'll start laying out our blocks ready for sewing our rows together. If you're wondering how I'm doing the squaring up on my cutting mat, I'm lining up my seam line with this 45-degree line so that I know it's going to be, because I want the half square triangle to remain true with the seam down the middle, and making sure it covers where I want it to sit. So I know that it's covering the size that I need it to be, and once I've done those two sides I can turn it around. So I am lining it up with the 10-inch line. Make sure again that the seam line is lining up with the 45-degree line on the cutting mat, lining up the ruler. And so sometimes there's only a little bit that gets trimmed off, sometimes there's a couple of mil. And that way we know that our seam line stays down through the points of our half square triangle. So when we sew it together, it ends up being correct and not, you know, with the seam not matching, and therefore it looks wrong, because it is wrong. Okay, this one I will only need to do two sides because this matches up very nicely with these two seams. So now that you have your half square triangles done and you've got the rest of your black squares cut out, I'm going to go ahead now and cut out my strips for my binding, because then I know what exactly I've got left to do my flower centers out of. You don't need a lot, that piece is not very big. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my 7 strips of 2.5 inches for binding. If you like yours a little bit narrower, then maybe cut it 2 1/4 inches. I like a good decent binding, so I'm going to cut mine at 2.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So much the same as what I had previously. I'll just tilt you down. There we go. So I've just done one cut here. So I've got the fabric. Again, it's folded in half and then in half again. You can either use the markings on your cutting board or on your ruler. Doesn't matter. It will use up most of what you've got left if you've got your full meter. If you're using stuff you found in your sewing room, you may have to find some extra little bits. But the flower centers are really not large. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One more. 7. And then this piece here is wider. It's about, for me, it's about 3 inches. So obviously depends on how exact your quilt shop cuts it. So maybe do a quick check beforehand. Yeah, so I have this piece that is going to be plenty big enough for my flower center. So I'm going to put that aside. What I am going to do is label this one with an F for flowers, so I don't get it confused with the binding. So if I roll this lot up so that they're all, and put them aside, then I know, tilt you up again, then I know that that's all set aside for when I'm finished with the quilting and my binding is ready to be pieced and added on. All right, it's probably time to start piecing this thing together. With the piecing, we are simply putting each block, sewing it to the next one into rows, and then we're going to sew those rows together. What I would suggest as far as your seams is that each row is pressed in a different direction so that they go like that. One that way, one that way. And then when it comes to putting it together, you can easily nest those seams. I find I get a nicer join. If you are a fan of pressing your seams open, again, I will suggest to you to consider what your quilting plan is going to be in case that's important. So one of the other things that we need to do before we get to our design wall or laying out our blocks is actually trimming the remaining blocks, the remaining squares from your layer cake down to the correct size. So that all our blocks are the same. So you can see I am lining it up. I've got, I think, three here, and it's a bit quicker to do 3 or 4 at a time. We line them up. Making sure they're even, then yeah, you can get through them quite a bit faster than doing it one by one, which would be extremely time consuming. So when you go to sew them together, you'll end up with a few of them that have like a straight edge, the cut edge, and the rest will be the machine cut serrated edge from when it was put together. So I've already done the dark, and this is my mediums. then I'll have the lights to do. So as long as two sides are all lined up, that's all you need, because the rest doesn't matter. Always do a double check. Measure twice, cut once. Alright, so I basically that's my mediums. I'm now going to go ahead and do that same thing with the lights, and I'll see you at the design wall. So it's a little bit later on, and I have managed to get 2 rows together. You've just seen a little bit of footage of that. Basically what I did was 2 rows at the same time. So I started with the first 2 blocks and sewed this seam, and then sewed this seam, and then went and got the next 2 blocks and added those to both the rows. I only did 2 rows at a time so that I didn't get myself confused. It was quite easy to just know which row I was doing, so you can certainly try it that way. And then worked my way all the way along. You can see, you might have seen I picked up this one. I actually forgot to add the last one of the second row. It's still sitting free. So basically I'm going to go through and do the same thing. I'm going to do the next 2 rows, and then the next 2 rows, and then the final row. So I'm going to go ahead and get all my rows together, and then I'll come back and it will be we'll get the rows together into rows, and then we simply fold this row down over this one and sew them together. So I'm getting my rows together. I've actually started at the bottom, and with each time that I go through I'm actually using my leader. So I put that through so that I don't have to hang on to my threads, and then I sew through to the end, and then cut that off and put the leader through again. I have done 3 rows so far, and so you can see on the wall, design wall behind me, that yeah, just keep working my way up. So with each time that I put them on, I have nested my seams. So you can see this seam goes that way and the seam on top goes that way. So then the next one up, yeah, it goes that way to start with, and the top one goes the other way. So each way along I'm nesting the seams. Now I did find this particularly helpful with the 2 half square triangles that are on the different rows. It meant those seams are actually sitting quite nicely. I did reverse that the very last square, so I'm hoping that works out at the top of the quilt in that corner actually. Right, so basically I am just nesting the seams with each block, sewing it along, and the rows are all coming together. So I'll show you that in fast motion. If you have any questions, please put them down below, and then I will show you my completed background. And then I am looking forward to getting into the applique next week. So let's get sewing.